Welcome to the dark side of the female psyche with Michael Tsarion.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the dark side of the female psyche with Michael Tsarion. Today's episode is, I'm sure, going to be another banger for anybody who has been watching from the beginning. I just want to say, as I was saying to Michael before I started recording, I've been doing this work for many years, but especially decided that it was important to dive deep after reading Dragon Mother and Adultism, both books that Michael Tsarion has written. And, as it was hard to digest, but at the same time, I knew it was the truth and that it had to be understood because this is not something we can ignore, especially as women. We can't ignore this information. And so I just urge everyone to bear in mind that this information isn't meant to be comfortable. It's meant more to bring truth to light. And so if you do feel uncomfortable, I just urge you to sit with that discomfort with a sincerity to really hear what Michael is saying, because there's important, deeply important truths that he's bringing to light. And that can benefit us, but it can also benefit us as mothers, as wives, as friends, as sisters. So without further ado, Michael, please go right ahead and proceed however you'd like.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that and for allowing me back on yet again. I think we can just continue the sort of thread that we've been on, tease out more. This one's called the Schizogenic Mother. That'll become more obvious as what that means in a minute when we look at a few slides. But you're quite right. Unfortunately, adultism has actually been on the increase. We always think to ourselves in our civilization that we're very, very advanced, and maybe on a technological level and intellectually we can make claims about that. But when it really comes down to it, from a psychological point of view and from a point of view of emotional intelligence, no, we're very, very primitive, and it would do us well to accept that. But we've talked ourselves into the opposite of that, probably since the Industrial Revolution. And we've mistaken activity, and we've mistaken hierarchic control for progress. And also just we've got caught up in the whole frenzy of adultism. It's affecting every single family. And it is generational. Maybe we'll touch on that a little bit today. It'll sort of factor in. Well, it always factors in. Anytime you're talking about the raising of children, we've got to look at the status of the parent. But adultism is not so much just in the interaction between parent and child. It's a condition or a pestilence that's within the thinking and attitude of the parent, but it's one they don't have. So when Freud talked about the unconscious, this is where I think there's a very major foothold here to be able to see it where it's not hidden in the long grass. What is this concept of the unconscious? We're not conscious of something. And when you're not conscious of something, it rules you. You don't rule it. So what we're doing here in these programs is to unveil this condition of adultism. And that is shadow work. We've already mentioned it on numerous occasions. The shadow work is nothing more than observing yourself, observing what it is you do of a day, and maturing that. First, you start with something very small and easy, where it's not painful. But then, as you just said, you need to work up to areas where it may be more confrontational. And then as you go, you realize how many bricks and boulders we've put in front of the door of this thing. As Alice Miller says, the fourth commandment. Why are there so many edicts and commandments about loving one's parents and respecting one's parents, but not a single one anywhere for respecting a child? Why? Isn't that imbalanced? Or doesn't that already put us onto the trail that something's really wrong? So now it becomes a matter of pulling away those boulders. And you find out how very difficult it is to gain this self-reflectiveness. And you wonder then what's been going on. And sooner or later, you come to the idea of the agreement, the contract between us all. So it doesn't matter if you're a college professor, doesn't matter if you're a CEO, doesn't mean, no matter what level of status you're on, we all have this secret agreement. Don't break the fourth commandment. And we never really run into anybody who has, so then we can't make a model of anyone who has. See, I believe that the person who has broken it and can see through the lies and hypocrisy of the parent and taken down from this lofty position has a better superego, has a healthier superego, and has a louder conscience, and has I wouldn't say a better life, but they are freer of neurosis within themselves and see things more clearly. They've done their shadow work, in other words, and that's always going to mean something good. But since we never meet those people, we don't have them as models to be able to see them for what they are and go, I want to be like that. Because as time has gone by, those types of people have become more and more rare. And the ones who've been abused have become more and more and more. Then you've got your experts who refusing to check out what the real experts say, like Alice Miller. They go round and round and round, right, with their pie charts and their chemical, their DSM. But again, don't forget, the focus there is very rarely on the parent. R.D. Laing will tell you, no, it's always on the deficiency within the child. They've got attitude problems. They've got defiance disorders. They've got ADHD and what have you. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of conditions. Very few of them ever deal with the parent. And if I mention to you Thomas Szasz, the expert on meddling parents and how the whole thing is set up, how many people have heard of his name? How many people have read one of his books? He wrote over 30 books on psychiatry and psychology and mostly the lie of it. The Manufacturing of Madness. He wrote a book called Schizophrenia. Right? And the medical hoaxes. How many have read Dr. Robert Mendelsohn? Confessions of a Medical Heretic. People who've seen behind the veil of the whole thing. And there's many, many other books. Saving Normal, I think is called. Brilliant book by one of the writers of the DSM who became a dissenter. And the whole thing. But back to this idea of the hubris that comes with being a parent, not humility. We recast ourselves as teachers, but we're not learning with the child, and we're certainly not learning from the child. It's all a one-way street. And in fact, there's even been schools so anti-Freudian, so patently anti-Freudian, that they even have tried to deconstruct and totally critique the story of the Oedipus stages in America. Right? It's part of this whole trend, trying to pretend that Freud got it wrong and there's no such thing. It's laughable. Right? But we said in an earlier program, is the child got a clipboard to say, well, yeah, I'm 3 now, I must have passed through the anal stage by now. Yeah, did I got to check, I got a 90% pass. Of course not. The child has no idea what's going on. Does a parent? Well, then doesn't that reduce the parent to the level of the child? If they're not aware of the psychosexual development and couldn't possibly tell you whether their child has gone through it or not? But surely they know what age it is to send a kid to school and what hours of the day it can be fed and when it can have a tooth pulled and when it can jump through all the other fucking hoops that society puts in front of it. Then it's good. Then we know. No, this is all about being on parade. This is about getting attention. And that already links back to what it is that the parent would even want that. Is because they themselves, don't want to fade into the background. And knowing that having a child now suddenly, the extended family and the neighbors and the folks down at the mall can circle around you, and the doctors and nurses flock, and you got social workers, and should there be any sort of complication, you're the center of it all, and we got some more experts coming in. Lift your skirt, let's have a good look. It's fucking Monty Python is what it is. And we love it. We sit there. This is our big chance to be observed. We're on, display. I'm an artist model now. The whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. Bestsellers are flying off the shelves. Have you ever read them? The shit that pregnant mothers are told to read. It's a circus. It's so bad. And if you try to mention any of the things we have done, my God, do you know any of the resistance? But the parent and the child know nothing about these, stages, whether it's Kohlberg's 6 stages of child development, or like I say, we just keep it here to the Freudian, but there's plenty of others. Rudolf Steiner had his, Montessori had hers, Reggio, John Bowlby, right? It's absolutely fascinating when you get into it. Wilhelm Reich, oh my God, you're off the charts. And this is what, if you were to read these and we understood these people, this is how you bring healing into the world. But clearly, this is not what we want. We got the pathology and we seem to like it. We don't want to bring the healing into the world. And so we get ourselves, into these messes, and we don't know how to get out of it. There's absolutely incredible new surfeit of works and websites and social media posts on gentle parenting. You and I have talked about this before. Again, sounds all good on the surface because the pendulum has swung over to the extreme permissive side. And I would think that would be quite easy to be able to, analyze. And the horror of it. We've spoken about that a child who's raised like that not only has been given so many things without earning it, that surely they're not going to have a sense of value because everything has come with a click of their fingers.
Exactly.
But it's even worse than that. The mere satiation factor, means that there's been no delayed gratification in the child. What? Are you kidding me? The whole thing about, the anal level, potty training and all is about the phasing of delayed gratification. We know that before that, the child will just scream the roof off if it doesn't get the breast. But as it moves beyond the oral, it has to learn this idea of sphincter control. And what that boils down to is the ability, and the body can do it. The body has a natural mechanism of retention and sphincter control, which an earlier child doesn't really have. It has to be spoon-fed. Everything has to be done for it. And that's okay. That's perfectly normal for a child, for an infant. Later on, you start learning this control. But this level of control, this psychosexual stage of development is absolutely fundamental to the whole of adult life. Delayed gratification. Well, we know that something must have gone wrong because look at all these criminal teens running in the streets today in Chicago and everywhere else. Does it look like them with their zero impulse control? Just watch the body cams, the police body cams. And they wonder why we call them hysterics. Tantrums in the middle of the road, squealing and yelling. Okay. And just the idea of crime, they disrespected me. Impulse control, I couldn't control myself. Not even aware of even the basics of delayed gratification. Well, that's the result of gentle parenting. The vanity of it, the lack of value in everything, and just the simple satiation is going to exhaust the senses and make these people utterly sadistic, demanding, and entitled by the time they're in their teens. In fact, so much so that they won't be able to integrate. Usually we can handle people who are sort of somewhat like that, but we can still get along with them because they've got other sides that we like. No. The gentle parent, then there won't be other sides that you can like. These people are not able to be even employed. They're that bad. They're that feral. And will they be able to be self-employed? What good is that? When they can't find jobs or they find the jobs but they get fired so quickly because they're awful, awful people who can't even take criticism. In fact, their whole thing is going to be about criticizing you. Because in the parent development, they couldn't assess where the parent was. There was no parenting. Gentle parenting means no parenting. What function does this adult have in my life? Well, none. The house is yours. You own everything. Put crayon all over the walls. Never wash your clothes. Eat when you feel like. Eat up. Your dietary needs. It's all upside down and inside out. How can anyone integrate with the adult world when you got that going on? But then this reflects and tells me, what kind of adults are you dealing with here? And we don't need to even go into it. These are adults who themselves have not grown up, and in some sense, have regressed themselves to the infantile level. Well, that's deadly. That means that they cannot delay gratification, or they've always found that to be difficult. Freud said that the thing about delaying gratification is that there's a positive hidden within it. Because if I delay gratification, I actually have a bigger gratification later on when I finally get the chocolate cake that I want. If I get it on tap right away, it ceases to be of value. It ceases to be craved. When the kid doesn't get that bike until the next birthday, it dreams about it every day. You see? And it builds up the expectation and it builds up the respect. And then when it gets it, and this can be even a book, anything precious that we're talking about. But if I'm just throwing it like buns to a bear, the thing has no inherent value. This is what we're bringing up in our world today. And you've got to explain it to people who've written best-selling books. They don't even know the basics. They should be ashamed of themselves. The horrors that they're creating.
Yeah.
Because it's not just you not having then evaluation of things external to yourself. There's a strange mechanism in life. You won't have the value. And if you say that long enough to yourself, you'll suddenly realize we're not talking just merely external objects. You won't have the value. You won't have the capacity or ability to value yourself, which is going to be one of the fundamental pillars of self-esteem. You won't value those who create the books and the bikes and the chocolate cake.
Exactly.
That's called communism. Got plenty of that. What you've got, I want. But if and when I get it, I squander it because it's not mine. Look at this USAID thing that was exposed from the Doge. It's not just the object we're talking about. It's the people who made the object and put the value in it. Even Karl Marx talked about the need for the value in the thing. Well, that's all scrapped. Even he knew that there must be a value in the work, the time and effort that you put into something. Gentle parenting erases that. It's worse than communism. That's how far we've got. Are you telling me that that's development? Montessori and Reich would be turning in their graves. And this is what we're getting. So I don't value the producer of the thing. Well, I'm going to be asked to be a producer, at a point it comes in my life. What have I produced? Now there's TikTok videos full of people sitting there crying, right, into their beer, saying, my life is meaningless. I've never done anything. I've never achieved anything. What? And all you got to do is push a button and have a podcast or do something. There's more ability now to take classes, and make even films. You can make bloody blockbuster movies on your cell phone, things that were unthought of before. You've got the computer, and they're sitting there telling you that they've achieved nothing and are living in it's ennui. But they have no clue where this is coming from. It's actually quite a star that they get for even being able to articulate it, even in the pathetic way that they're doing. I actually give them a star for that, because it's quite amazing that they've even have that level of self-reflection. I'm amazed. The people I'm talking about actually wouldn't even have that. They wouldn't even know where you're coming from. There's no lineaments. There's no verbal communication. Criminologists who work exclusively in prisons always say that even the worst serial killers and rapists and what have you, the moment that they improve their communication skills, immediately their desire to do crime falls away till it's almost nothing. And then these are the ones who are truly contrite and cannot believe what they were doing in their life before. They're like two people. They're like night and day, just by simply improving their vocabulary. In other words, communication, empathy. Yeah. But that was just a footnote, because what we're creating are people who won't even have that impulse. And with open borders and things like that, where the cultural differences are massive, you're having that as well. So that person that we're talking about is going to be purely, in one sense, passive. The gentle parenting creates a totally passive child who's just on the receiving end. Right? They cannot produce, they cannot create, and they cannot give. That doesn't even factor in. The whole Hegelian process of symbiosis, empathy, or the I-thou, as Martin Buber put it, is disappeared. And Buber said that when the I-thou disappears, both parties return to the level of it. It can only be I-it. If I don't endow you with thou-ness, with a selfhood equal to my own, you are automatically reduced to an it. But in the strange dynamic, Buber says, but so will you be. You can't endow another person with itness without you yourself actually defaulting to the same level. So we've got the communication of two its, two nothings. This is what this gentle parenting is about to create, and may be creating. And this is the great solution of the West to the problems of life, of child rearing and teenage life. This is as far we've got. So the Wilhelm Reichs can go out the door, but this is what you've got. This is what you're replacing it with. This is considered a solution. So a sensible person can weigh it all up. If you say that selflessness and Eastern jive is good, then I say, okay, read the opposite. Do you know where to find the opposite? Can you find a Nathaniel Branden or an Ayn Rand so that you can weigh up the two? Oh, no, I just believe what the Dalai Lama told me. I've seen him on opera. I've seen him on opera, so it must, I love that. Yeah. But do you know what the opposite is? So you can test one to the other. Do you know what the opposite? No, I have no idea. Oh, right. How many people actually go to the length of finding out what is the opposite of that which they're just about to sell their souls for, and weigh it up and find out, oh, wait a minute, there's parts of that I like as well. That's the American way over here. Oh, this is, well, what the nuclear family, this would help. It's different than that. This is what raises the standard of living. This is what makes me feel much better and not become so enslaved to the will of some fucking guru. I like that. I like the sound of this. No. Nobody knows what you're talking about. But my God, So we've got some slides. Maybe let's go through those. Things will become more clear, I think. Sure. If you don't mind, Sarah, please.
Oh, absolutely. Is it all right if I just make a quick comment on gentle parenting before we do that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I was listening to Hannah Spear. She was a guest on your show. She has a Substack as well, where she talks about things like gentle parenting. From what I understand, she's a psychotherapist. And she was mentioning another angle on it as well, is that it is a way for narcissistic mothers to manipulate their children using emotional manipulation, basically placing the onus on the child to have enough emotional intelligence to regulate themselves so that the mother doesn't feel upset. So it starts getting really twisted from certain angles of how it can be applied. It can actually become quite manipulative in a extremely sadistic way, where the mother actually uses the child and to project their own inner resentment onto. It was just one angle that I saw where I thought, oh my gosh, that tracks. That sounds like incredibly possible. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that.
100%. No, I'm with you. I totally believe that. See, back in the Victorian days when Freud wrote, it was so much more simple. The father was the prohibitive, imago, and the mother was almost entirely, very few exceptions to this rule in those days, was the permissive. It all went out the door as soon as the 20th century came in. But nevertheless, that was the original pattern. So the feminists who were reading Freud discovered this and immediately, right, buttonholed that. They took hold of this because they knew it would work for them who want to exalt the female. So make a lot of noise about woman being the permissive. And they forgot to tell you that when the 20th century came in, this had all gone out the door. This is a redundant part of Freud. But they didn't want to tell you that because, of course, it looks so wonderful and glorious for women to speak that in the nuclear family, they are the permissive ones. So gentle parenting is born out of feminism and born out of this lie. You know, if you track it back, some men have written the books, but that doesn't mean anything. The theory itself was substantiated only by world feminism. So it's very anti-masculine, and you're quite right. This would be the way to go. It's a form of virtue signaling for mothers who've been indoctrinated with this idea that in the early days, of pediatrics, in the early day of child rearing, the mother was the permissive one. So gentle parenting is a form of feminism. It's part of the ultra feminization of our culture. Absolutely. And we could even explore that more, actually. But, I want to leave that because there's authors I want to talk about, down the line where this will become relevant.
Okay. Then I can start with the first slide then if.
Okay.
Okay. So this is a quote from Melanie Klein in her work, The Psychoanalysis of Children. It says, although psychology and pedagogy have always maintained the belief that a child is a happy being without any conflicts and have assumed that the sufferings of adults are the results of the burdens and hardships of reality, it must be asserted that just the opposite is true. What we learn about the child and the adult through psychoanalysis shows that all the sufferings of later life are for the most part repetitions of these earlier ones, and that every child in the first years of life goes through an immeasurable degree of suffering.
And we've already touched on exactly that last time. Because part of that suffering, probably a major part of it, we'll touch on other ones, supplementary ones today, but the rage, remember, the rage that permeates your cells, your fibers, your nerves, your mind, that is a form of suffering already, emerging out of the semiotic level. And the slow erasure of your will, or the poisonous atmosphere, we put it in different metaphors, right, that you find from the womb onwards. But this poisonous atmosphere can also exist at all the different stages at some point. And those stages are already conflictual and difficult because the animalistic part of us, which has to be civilized, doesn't want to be really. So a child left on its own, you can never have such a thing, but just use your imagination. A child left in the wild wouldn't ever go through any psychosexual stages of development. If it did, it would be, so low on the charts. It would be just a rough, furry version of it, right? Hardly to speak of. The ultimate idea is that the parents represent civilization, and every new child, well, yes, there is going to be this repression of your instincts, which wouldn't exist in the wild. Not in anything like the same sort of way. But so what I'm trying to say is that these psychosexual stages are already oppressive to the child. It's already, without anybody's help, going through difficulty and hurdles. Why do I need to go through this? If it could speak, it would go, to hell with this. I'm having fun here, just being a little, soft, furry thing. I don't want to change the status quo. And yet here's life throwing at me all sorts of obstacles and parents there with a big stick goading me to go through it. But I don't want to. And we know this anyway. What's all the squealing and the shouting and tantrums and tears all about? The child is red in the face telling you, don't want any of this. I mean, it's so obvious. It's phenomenological. Yeah. So yes, she's right. The suffering that a little infant goes through, and of course the parent is oblivious. It's all been normalized. And we have become so desensitized anyway. We've had to take so much on the chin from life that when we give birth, we're not even sensitized to anything with the, I mean, I could tell you stories from what I've observed. It's not good. And I don't do it because you would just laugh. The audience would just laugh because this stuff is so ubiquitous that if you mentioned what it is, they wouldn't even see it as anything toxic. We're that desensitized. So I just won't mention any of the anecdotes about the push chairs and strollers and mothers and what they put their kids through. No, I'm not going to draw pictures. I've done it in other work, and believe you me, it doesn't get you anywhere. But anyway, let's go on.
Here we have a quote from R.D. Laing in his book, The Divided Self, where he says, "It all begins with fear, the fear of being helpless, a fear so great that we block out all memory of the helplessness which characterizes the beginning of human existence, instead of accepting it and integrating it into our experience. For many men, their rejection of this fundamental human quality reduces their life to a farce."
All right, so now there's those supplemental ones. We've got the rage, which is an awful pathological condition. But here he's talking about also this impotency, right? The state of weakness from just being simply vulnerable and not knowing what the hell is what. Being thrown into a world where we are the weakest and most vulnerable of creatures. Naturally, we're going to want to cling to this larger being that's there, that we hold on to for dear life. Hopefully that this is a rock, and we need two of them. Well, we did, in order to cling because of our natural vulnerability. And that's also a fear. Like he's saying, it is really a fear. Fear of being human, more existential, more basic. And others would call it anxiety. And we've even talked about last time, we don't need to talk about it here again at any length, the anxiety that maybe the child is even feeling in the mother. But we've covered that, so we can not have to visit that again. No, he's talking about a very basal, fundamental anxiety about being that vulnerable, being that young, being that inexperienced. And you're shaken by it. It's a sort of a nascent condition, and you have to have it. It's just the way it is. But it makes a farce, he says, of people. He mentions men, but he's talking about all. But because there's compensation involved then. And I've spoken with this to you before, that even a lot of our workout culture and sports culture. See, if you talk to Lang, he'd agree. Something in us always contains the memory of this pathological weakness, this organic weakness. And we come to loathe it. There's a loathing on top of the condition of fear and anxiety and weakness. There's also a loathing that emanates from having, being in that condition. And it permeates so much of our life that why is it that you see teenage boys loving sports? They don't love sitting under a tree contemplating the stars or the heavens or the sky or the raindrops. No, they love kicking a ball about and mucking it out. Girls love the hockey, you see, and the cycling and the jogging and all the fucking rest of it. Is it really about physical culture? Of course it is to a degree, but what is that itself based on, and why so young? Why are we tensing our muscles? What's it all about? Well, we have a culture that insists upon it, but we can have a culture. What do we like about it? Why do we fixate on it on Saturdays when we watch the sports? Or, what's the whole thing about? Why the attraction, in other words? Well, the attraction is there because of what he just said. We're trying to compensate for an underlying sense of weakness. Now, that's basic Freudianism. So then I wonder what they're coming at Freud for. You see, this is what you've got to do. When you study these subjects and you're always looking at the counterpoint, you end up wondering, what is this counterpoint? And it's mostly in feminist writers, by the way. They're the ones trying to attack Freud, not expand upon him or anything like that, which I think is needed. No, this was like a complete, we're brushing that away. Let's go to some other expert.
Yep.
That talks about women being, far superior and all the rest of it. They've hijacked it. How can you doubt this? Our culture clearly shows you what's going on. But the fact is that from sports, what's the jump between sports and war? Last time I looked, not that far. Did you know that the church was behind in England sports? And it only was within 10 to 20 years before the First World War. And the fact that the sports, rugby and football, that was the church men forced the colleges. Did you know that colleges and universities never had teams until the church stuck its nose in and said, we need it? Were 11 men that they knew, 11 men would go out in a field and play sports. And then within 10 years, within less than 20 years, and sometimes 10 years, there was the First World War. How convenient. How convenient. And that before that time, there was no such camaraderie. There was no such state. They reawoke the primitive hunter man, right, who went out in a team of about approximately 11 to fight a mammoth or, hunt. But it was the church who insisted to university. Universities are not there for sports. They never were originally. They were there for the intellectual development. They were like, you could think of them as being cloisters for monks. When's the last time you've seen a monk doing the hurdles? Or running around with a rugby ball, getting into a scrum? Look, something's way off here. Ah, well, there hangs the tail. It's absolute. When you break it down, you can't believe it. They needed that. They needed to reawaken that, and they did it. And they did it through the church, thinking it's a sin if I don't get together with my little buddies here and chase a football, like a bunch of rats being taught. And then, 10 years later, you're in the trenches, knowing how to work in that team. How convenient. But now it's do or die. So, look, the whole thing is a farce. But let's go on. So here's again another source, in other words, of difficulty. We've talked about several: delayed gratification, the rage, and now we're talking about the weakness and also the loathing that comes with the weakness that you have. And then on top of that, the need to compensate. But that might be adopting a false life, a life that is only trying to correct something, but you're not actually facing it. There's a whole different world between facing that weakness and looking into that and trying to compensate for it. They're not the same thing. They're absolutely not the same thing. In our thinking, they often are. Or you think there's something justified about that. Well, I've to overcome that. Or you're not thinking about it consciously. But that's the point. If you don't think about the thing consciously and bring it to consciousness, it rules you. And you're off on some other journey. And you may feel that you're committed to it, but there's going to be this lifelong feeling on the other side of your mind of despair, of ennui, of my life is not fully meaningful. Well, right, because you set off on a trajectory that's not going to be completely fulfilling. Do you know why so many sports people are on drugs? And when they, finally pass what they consider the peak experience, collapse.
Yeah, exactly.
And on the misery of finding some guy's better than you climbing right up behind you. You thought you was the number one guy, and now it's nothing but younger guys coming up and kicking your ass. Yeah, what's so good about that? More pain, more suffering, more striving. But I've got a row of cups on my mantelpiece. Big fucking deal. You were cannon fodder back in 1914. That's what that did for you. Let's go on.
Almost everywhere, we find the use of various coercive measures to rid ourselves as quickly as possible of the child within us. That is, the weak, helpless, dependent creature, in order to become an independent, competent adult deserving of respect. When we re-encounter this creature in our children, we persecute it with the same measures once used in ourselves. A quote from Alice Miller in her book, The Drama of the Gifted Child.
Wow, what a statement. Carrying directly on from what I've just said, don't forget that the cycle will continue, because what do? We give birth to our own weak, organically inferior people, these little children. And what happens when they're born? Yes, it's cuddly, it's wonderful, right? There's a big high, but also there's the reminder in their weakness of our own, because we are not as advanced as we think. And we're brought back to the beginning. The child forces us to come back to the semiotic, to the archaic, to the oral and the anal. We also go through it. It's taken to this podcast to mention this. Didn't want to cloud up the previous ones. The psychosexual developments, the Oedipal stage, or the electrocomplex, as Jung would later call it, is not just of the child. We too go through it again. We too get a chance to relive each of those 5 stages. Right up to teenage years. We don't let go of a child until they're beyond their teenage years. Well, right, that's even into the latency and genital phase. We're there when they get their first lover. We're there approving of their girlfriends and boyfriends. That means we're sticking our nose right in. We're there when they first learn to masturbate. Right? And become sexual beings. So we are ourselves passing through each of these stages again. Is that what we wanted? Is that the sign of failure? When we went through it the first time? You bet it is. If you're a gambling man, put your money on that. That is it. Full circle. Thank you, Mrs. Miller. The child is not alone going through Freud's Oedipal complex. We are doing it. We're reliving it because it was a fiasco the first time round. What the hell? We may go through it even 3, 4, 5, 6 times because it's still botched. Because we had no mentors. And the mind is such a thing, so extraordinarily deep. Maslow would say self-actualization. He's thinking of Hegel. The idea that we need self-realization is paramount. We know we're here for that. We know that in every interaction that with another, or even a thing, an object, is because we're looking for that part of ourself in that thing. We're coming back to the self through every interaction with everyone and everything. The universe is nothing but a giant mirror in which we're discovering who we are. And it will do it again and again in order to find what was lost, the relics, the broken parts, the fragments of ourselves. So in having a child, we are able to relive what was impaired and where the arrested parts of ourselves are, and some part of our psyche, you can almost thank it. Adler would call it the unconscious mind. Adler thought of the unconscious mind as a kind of a recording device. That literally, like you speak into a recorder. And it remembered all these parts of our lives where there was a breach. And we repeat the pattern. And it directs us to do this. I have a program called Forgotten Genius Alfred Adler on, oh my God, do I suggest people sign up and watch that? But the idea is that the parent is undergoing it as well. Didn't want to mention this in any of our programs before because it just it was taking us completely off and it would blur the points we wanted to make where we're totally focused on the infant itself. But as a matter of fact, this is a co-journey. And the parent can either now pass through successfully where it failed its own self, or it can fail again. It's an individual case. Yeah. And real psychotherapy, born out of the Maslow type of model, if you went to see a therapist and you had already birthed children, that therapy would include this. They definitely want to go back to your childhood, and they'd want to go back to what you experienced with your own child. So you can't throw out Freud. You can't say, well, all that stuff about your childhood. Yeah, we don't want to look at that. Is that right? If you've given birth, you've already gone through it yourself. Again. Freud wins. They try to shoot, throw darts at him. Yeah, 3 fingers pointing back. He bounces right back up again. Because every parent has relived the Oedipal. And may have botched it yet again. But this time they've taken a fellow traveler along with them. That's another child to enter the world going, oh, sorry, doc, missed it. But look at the genius of the mind itself, leading you through it again. These are how precious these things are. Can you read that one more time?
Almost everywhere we find use of various coercive measures to rid ourselves as quickly as possible of the child within us. That is, the weak, helpless, dependent creature, in order to become an independent, competent adult deserving of respect. When we re-encounter this creature in our children, we persecute it with the same measures once used in ourselves.
Yeah. So, of course, she's talking about the syndrome where because we had so a tendentious and problematic relationship with that weakness and we carry it through, we've talked about the compensations, so it's still with us. And while we're still under its sway, we give birth. Only to meet another child who embodies the very thing we want to get away from. So there's naturally going to be a bivalent thing. But do you see how then bad parenting is now almost a guarantee?
Yeah.
She's explaining where the bad parenting comes about. When you have a toxic relationship with your child, it's because you are punishing that child for its weakness that is in you. There's a lot in that quote.
There is a lot.
Yeah. Right. Because it's triggering your own sense of inferiority that may be still quite deep within you, even if you're 30 years old. But most people are giving birth in their 20s and even younger. So you can guarantee that this feeling of weakness and its complex, the complex of your own weakness and its compensations are alive and well. It may be very much so because you've also come through university and school and jumped through all these hoops and maybe you haven't made it and all. There's still feelings of this impotency and weakness. You may have had to compete. You may have siblings that are better than you or cousins or just the world. And then you're giving birth. Naturally, this organic weakness is going to, you're not prepared for it. You don't know this is going to happen. But it rubs you up the wrong way. And now you become a little bit hostile and demanding. And suddenly this sort of weird tyrannical aspect of you is coming out. And you never knew it was there. And you've no idea where it's coming from. And part of you may be going, why am I doing this? Why am I being so rough with my children? But you can't stop it. And there's no one to turn to. You think you're going to run across a podcast like this or somebody who's going to tell? Very unlikely. You can go to the top pediatricians. They won't tell you any of this.
No.
So let's go on.
Most pediatricians are more concerned of whether or not you're giving your kids vaccines rather than the state of their health. on other levels.
This is from the book On Sham, Vulnerability, and Other Forms of Self-Destruction by Jules Henry. In schizogenic families, sham and confusion infest every aspect of life, so that the people in it draw a crooked breath, so to speak. By the time he is 6 years old or so, the child has probably learned that he will be shot if he does not believe with all his heart and soul that sham is truth.
Right. So another syndrome, we're adding them up now, is hypocrisy. You're not going to take the sham. You're going to be forced to take it. You have no choice because there's no normality around you. The thing is so bad that you are forced. We've actually, everything we've been describing is the schizophrenic or schizogenic family in the sense because, you know, of the idea of a splitting. But an actual schizophrenic person can be created out of this, let alone a schizophrenic culture. But this is the tricks that parents play with themselves and with the child. They're not dealing with these problems that arise in a healthy way. It's really that bad. Now, if you are taking falsity for reality, my God, isn't that something extraordinary? If you are thinking that your parents are lovable when they're not, isn't that extraordinary? Isn't that going to affect your lives and your superego because you're going to embody the images of these parents? You're already trying to live up to their expectations of you. So what happens at this point? Instead of organic feeling, which would be the solution to all of this, and self-expression in the child, you're not expressing yourself. You're thinking about what the parents want from you. There's a big difference in moving in centers of consciousness. Instead of being in your body and your heart, you've shifted to your brain. At that young, vulnerable age, you're becoming an intellectual because I have to put filters up, which tell me I have to put an antenna up to read what it is my parents want from me, which is a world away from what I want to do with my expression, naturally and organically. Great. Could you think of anything more perverse? So the child stops feeling and stops expressing and becomes a sham. Because before it can feel and express, it has to register and do as it thinks the parents want it to do and think. This is a big shift, creating a major schism. No child should be worrying about that. Not till much, much later. But the bad parent, the neglectful parent, the impatient parent, the prohibitive parent, you know, the cold and different one, I'm having to walk on eggshells and use intellectual abilities to size up and take a GPS reading. Where the fuck are they today in their moods and their attitude? Exactly. When I should be emoting. And I should be, my focus should be on my own self. I'm becoming familiar with my own being. But I'm being displaced from that, you see, into this surveilling child. I'm pushed out of myself. I have to suppress that body intelligence, that emotional intelligence, which is vital because I'm young. But I've been displaced now to just being on guard and scanning the room. And then I condition my behavior now. It's not natural because now my behavior is going to morph and be entirely articulated to the mood, right, and needs of the parent.
Yeah.
Rather than a full-blown, right, natural. So the natural becomes what? An impediment.
Yeah.
Because the natural doesn't go away. And we still shed tears, and we still get frustrated, and we still kick and scream. The natural isn't going anywhere. But of course, what is going to happen is there's a master-slave relationship being made now, because life and the developing superego demands that I do the false and the sham. I end up finding that there's no choice. So in the end, I feel that the natural flow of emotion within me becomes an impediment. My own body becomes an impediment. My own needs, my own wants. And so I start to hate the organic. Is this starting to come together?
Oh boy, is it ever.
My God. My God. Do you see what happens?
Yeah.
So the very organism that we are, because of this split that's taking place, becomes toxic. Everything is switched. It's not the parents that are toxic, because their needs rule. They're the big imagos. They're the twin peaks. Our own self-expression becomes the pariah, the impediment. And now comes the mechanisms of control that we'll later know as the superego, but they develop through the sphincters, they develop through the erogenous zones, they suppress the pleasure principle within us. We never get to express it properly. And each of those psychosexual stages of development in the Oedipal state are areas where this problem we're talking about remanifests. The same problem we're talking about happens at the oral and the anal, right, and the phallic. We relive it in different forms of intensity of how we divide ourselves from our bodies. It's much more technical than we can get into, but I'm just sketching it. At each of these stages, a demand is put upon us to do that. If I'm breastfeeding, well, my mom's not there, and I know I can sense in myself that she wants to go and watch the soap opera, or go chatting with her mates or something, something like, or get on the phone, and she's just completely distanced. Aren't I adjusting my nature? Isn't my natural needs being suppressed and blocked and filtered? And it's the same all the way down the line.
Right.
If I'm at the phallic level and there's a shift within me saying, it's vague, but I see that my mother, because I've now met aunties and I've met the neighbors and I've met maybe a sibling or somebody or a teacher or something along those lines, visiting a visitor of the house. So my mother is one of these other people called woman. And I may be just in the process of negotiating the difference between detaching from mother and seeing her separately as a female, which is vitally important for my development to pass through this. But she doesn't want that. She senses what's going on and doesn't want to break this connection and only wants me to address her as mother. Aren't I curtailed? Don't I then have to adjust to her will? Isn't her will dominating? And aren't I being arrested at the phallic level? I'm being forbidden to see her as a female agent. In her agency as just a female and woman and all the things that means. But that's been cut off. That's being taboo. We don't want that. She can sense it and doesn't want to detach. So does things that continue mothering me. Tie your shoelaces again and eat when you're told, the mothering comes out even more at the phallic level because she realizes that there's a detaching from this state of motherhood. It's over now. We're working to wind it down. No, but she doesn't want that. You see these mothers who are constantly brushing the child's hair and constantly fixing its straps and tying its shoelaces and over fussing. Why are they doing it? What's going on? There's no need for it. There's no life and death situation. But this is the over-mothering, the smother mother who comes in, right? The helicopter mother, as it's now being called, because this is a woman who does not want her child to transit through the phallic level. And we can give umpteen more examples of this. Yet, the thing that is happening is absolutely vital. But if the parent only sees herself in the role of mother and is priding herself on that and doesn't even see herself as woman, she's so completely embodied in the role and she's forgotten about herself and all the other distinctions. Do you think she's going to feel good when her child is having that level of objectification and detachment? No. No. And so all sorts of quite, hideous aberrations will come of this in their attitudes. The psychologists write about it. There's innumerable case histories. Look at Pink Floyd's The Wall movie. It's all there. It's just a dictionary of it from A to Z, of the mother that won't give up being the mother, refuses to let the child progress sexually. And then these are the mothers who absolutely despise it when their adult sons go and get a date later on. Oh my God. Yeah. And there's so many of them. They always want to intrude into that. It's actually quite fascinating, but horrific to experience. But let's go on.
The schizophrenic is painfully distrustful and resentful of other people due to the severe early warp and rejection he encountered in important people of his infancy and childhood, as a rule, mainly in a schizogenic mother. The schizophrenic's partial emotional regression and his withdrawal from the outside world into an autistic private world with its specific thought processes and modes of feeling and expression is motivated by his fear of repetitional rejection, his distrust of others, and equally so by his own hostility, which he abhors, as well as the deep anxiety promoted by this hatred. Frida from Reichmann, The Schizophrenic Mother.
Yep. So there you have it again. The anxiety, the fear, and the weakness. The whole cocktail is now the reason why you have schizophrenia. But you also have the halfway point, the schizophrenia, which, and the quarter point. You don't have to have it full blown where you're entering the mental asylum. Most children are like this. How can you negotiate all the complications we've just spoken about? You can't demand that the parent change its ways. This is why it's called adultism. Adult can tell you what to do and you'll hop to it. Child has no voice. It can only scream. It cannot demand the parent change even one jot. And the other parents, they're useless. Right? The parents who are around, they're not observing anything.
Yeah.
They're not there to, correct. So it's a one-way street. You are absolutely victimized, and you hate the fact that you're victimized. Now, the first part of the quote, of course, was, where does the child go when it knows that it's not being heard? We talked about that. Well, it shrinks back from reality itself. The arrested child who fails on all of these levels, these psychosexual levels, is never satisfied because it knows that it hasn't passed through correctly. There's always this element of frustration. And as the frustrations build, then somewhere around 6, 7, 8, these actual schizophrenic traits start to show in the child. They're not normal. Well, and we can always debate what really ultimately then, it's all about. This quote is trying to tell you that there's just a retreat back to the semiotic where it was safe. And that means that the schizophrenic is trying to find a haven within its own self. Go back, because there was a time when there was relative tranquility and peace. But that's very early on. That's back to the semiotic level, before the oral, before the anal. So it's trying to find a refuge within itself. It's unsuccessful because nature itself doesn't really allow you to go back. These are pages of a book that only turn in one direction. So it's a no-win situation. But what all the schizophrenic knows is I can't keep going forward. I can't go and meet reality. Because every time I've done that, there's been frustration. Remember we said in delayed gratification, it's okay. Freud says it will become natural to us because we get a really big fulfillment when we finally get our hands on that which we needed. That dollar took so long to earn. But when we finally get it, we're like, whoa, that's precious. Really going to enjoy this. But once that's taken away, there's nothing but hard work and frustration, hard work and frustration. And even by 6 years old, the child goes, not a good deal. Don't like life. Don't like reality. Don't want any more to do with it. Not going to move forward in this Adlerian way. Don't want to overcome because there's no payoff down the line.
Right.
But let's go on.
In 1960, Scottish psychoanalyst Ronald D. Lang concluded his first book, The Divided Self, a study of sanity and madness, with a case study of a psychotic. Lang recounts the story of Julie, who was in her mid-20s when Lang met her. She had been institutionalized at the age of 17 when she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Julie suffered from auditory hallucinations and delusions of persecution. She believed the world was coming to an end. She believed she was not a real person and spoke in incomprehensible gibberish, yet a statement Julie repeated appeared to Lang to have a special significance. Julie said that a child has been murdered. A quote from Michael E. Staub in his work Madness is Civilization.
Yeah, carry on to the next one. They're both connected.
Over time, Lang began to piece together an interpretation of Julie's utterances, concluding that Julie would never have become insane if not for her family. This had certainly never been their intention. They had always wanted what was best for her. Nevertheless, they had colluded to kill Julie's sense of selfhood, squeezing any sense she possessed of herself as real or alive out of her at a tender age. Julie's mother declares herself to be loving when in truth she has been withholding love. Michael E. Staub, Madness is Civilization.
Yeah, exactly. And again, just to repeat, the child has no way of going, Mom, you're being unloving. Please change your ways. Not possible. Nothing the child can do can change the status quo and get its needs fulfilled. Nothing. This is the helplessness that the child gets plunged in and will remember all its life. But let's go on.
In the psychological atmosphere created by parents, siblings, caretakers, and other important sources of love and approval, each child begins the necessary process of ego development. Human adaptation to the society requires the creation of an ego, an I, to serve as the organizing principle of our growing consciousness. Ego development depends upon our repressing what is wrong or bad in us, while we identify with what is perceived and reinforced as good. R.D. Lang.
That's right. And he's quoting basic Freudianism there. The creation of the ego. And more importantly, the superego, which comes in to steady the ego and to basically orient the ego to the needs of others. So this is where, and we've spoken about this as extensively, but again, it's always necessary to recapitulate. What happens here is that the superego comes in, and in order to resolve all these conflicts that we've been underlining and detailing, the superego is created. But its solution, sadly, is to say 100% identification with the objects of your hate.
Mm-hmm.
Done deal. Sign here. I mean, this is a pact with the devil. However, it delivers. You are going, fucking no way will I do that. I'm not saying that. But the superego goes, but you have to. Because watch what happens when you do. Once you identify with the objects of your hate, there's a reduction, a massive reduction of this anxiety that is, destroying you by this age of 6 and 7 years old. And you're just on the threshold of going out to the world to meet other people. There's going to be a lot more stress to come, mate. And you can't go into that world being this frustrated child. You just won't make it. But I have a way of suppressing all these memories. Just give me the keys, give me the okay, and I'll take care of it. And so we sign on, and then we get these imagos imported into us. But as we've said before, the key thing to remember here, and it's absolutely essential to remember, is that it's not a one-to-one introjection of the imagos of the parents. The superego magnifies the prohibitive voices. And that it doesn't matter whether that comes from the father or the mother. Now, the feminists didn't like that. Key pillar of a key plank of their theories was that they wanted the father always to be the prohibitive and the mother to be the permissive. That worked for them. So, oh my God, that was just like honey. That was like, but it broke down. It broke down. They couldn't use it. Right? And they were chewing the carpet as the 20th century moved in, and they realized they had to throw this part away. Because boy, oh boy, did they get animated when they first heard this. They went, we've got it. We've got the central plank of our, thank you, Mr. Freud. But as the 20th century came in and the roles of women changed, this was no longer of use. We've spoken about that. But back to the point. Regardless of whether it's the mother or the father, the superego magnifies, amplifies their prohibitive voices. It actually internalizes the problem so that the master-slave situation is recreated within us by the time the superego comes along. And we're just about to remonstrate when in fact we noticed that when we identify with this power, anxiety is in fact lowered. And a measure of security comes along. Plus there's other repressive mechanisms. This is what this slide is talking about. And all of those emotions that we're feeling inside and boiling up in our body, we suppress it. We repress it into the body.
Mm-hmm.
And the ultimate payoff is the approval of the crowd. The superego only has, well, not only one function, but this is its cardinal function. Now you're a good little boy. Now mom and dad are relieved. And remember, they have to be relieved because there's one thing that Alice Miller knows and all the top psychologists know about mom and dad. They want to be good parents. You can't give them a report card at 7 years old and go, you guys were bad parents. 7 years of total failure. No, that's not how the system works. They're waiting for their prize. They're waiting for their medal. And the superego is going to give it. You go, Mom, Dad, you're just the greatest. I've identified with you. I've fawned. Mom, I love you. Dad, it was all for my own good, wasn't it? Yeah, that's right, son. Yeah, I was doing it for your own good. Yeah, you were. I'm letting you all. You have carte blanche. I will never break the fourth commandment. Oh, fucking brilliant. So that's it. That's the contract. And we enter the world as an adult now. You've been initiated now. You're one of them.
Exactly.
And you will bring into the world the same master-slave relationship that you've now embodied in your mind. You have no choice. You might masquerade it as love, just in the same way that the parents masqueraded it as love.
Yeah.
But and you will censor all of these other weird peccadillos like we talked about that you may have, or later on these pathologies of alcoholism and what have you, and beating up and rape and porn and all the other things. Yeah, well, it's okay. I'm not going to really focus on that. I guess everybody does that.
Which makes it okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or something to do with, homosexuality and lesbianism, all these peccadillos. No, I'm going to normalize it because I'm identifying now with some identity politics and a bunch of other lost souls. But I get together with them and everything's cushy because, all right, the superego's made sure that you're going to embody the crowd in your head. Today, it's not just the crowd, it's just a small group, a small clique. But the payoff is that I've forgiven my parents. I don't need to bother with that anymore. But you don't realize what's happened. Maybe instead of projecting that anger on them, I've interjected it into myself. The demands I put on myself are extraordinary. We know that they are because that's why there's suicides now at 10 and 11 years old. But it was always there, even before that spate, this modern spate of disaster. Any trained psychologist could easily see that things were wrong. But we've normalized the wrong. It's all right. Go and identify with the anarchists and the hunt saboteurs and go paint the walls and do graffiti and call it art. Right? And get into all the other sludge that is expected of us. and then be so full of rage that even if there's beauty in the world, we're going to tear it down. We're going to throw paint over it. It's become so desensitized, so hateful and envious. We're looking at the roots of all of it right now. But let's go on.
Many people suffer all their lives from this oppressive feeling of guilt, the sense of not having lived up to their parents' expectations. This feeling is stronger than any intellectual insight they might have, that it is not a child's task or duty to satisfy his parents' needs. No argument can overcome these guilt feelings, for they have their beginnings in life's earliest periods, and from that they derive their intensity and obduracy. From Alice Miller.
That's right. So this is another function of the superego, is not only to embody the imagos, but to scrupulously condemn yourself for not heeding and obeying these absurd edicts of these unloving lunatics. Look how skewed it's become. You're scrupulously needing to walk on eggshells around them, to put halos around their heads. Now, their actions are motivated by the needs of society, right? Their function was largely based on how they were raised or whatever the culture wants. Look at what's happening in the Muslim world. But it's all over. And so then you start to say, to acculturize yourself, courtesy of the superego, because it's adjusting the ego to the world. And it's saying, what your parents did was the right way. And it's only because you're constantly criticizing them that you don't see that. So you know what we need to do? We kind of need to stop criticizing and start seeing all the things that they did as being for your own good. Doesn't that lower anxiety? And you go, well, there's a big world out there. It's full of wolves and traps and crocodiles and obstacle courses. Well, and I don't really know what lies around the corner. So yeah, maybe they did. Maybe my alcoholic father and narcissistic mother were kind of aware of that and helping me. Yeah, okay. I don't know what's out there. Maybe it will help. And the superego goes, but it will. Remember, they are the Twin Peaks. They are the head honchos. They know exactly what's going on. This was all done for your own good. They've lived before you. They've gone out there into society. They're functional. Your dad has a job. He's respected. And so you just sit there. You have no alternative, you see, because in all the things that you juggle with and work out, this is the simplest route. So sublimation, displacement, compensation, repression, all the 9 yards. This is the mutilated Frankensteinian monster we become, moving out into the world, playing the sham. But since I'm not the only one doing it, everybody is doing it, then what do you think has become our culture? This is the necrophilus culture, not biophilus. And then you look at the treatment of nature. Well, which of the two is it? The endless wars. We can't get over it. The savagery. It's so obvious. But we've normalized it. So we live in guilt, she says. And this is guilt, not shame. But the shame is another component which I've done so much work on to also bring to bear. We haven't talked about it here and we won't need to. But the shame, just to throw it in, comes from the conscience, which is the other and more primary moral center. Because the moment that we commit to everything we've just been speaking about, when we start to become one of these collectivized hysterics, when we allowed the crowd to be imported into our mind, we become what the existentialists call inauthentic. Or Sartre called it, we live in bad faith with ourselves. Well, we don't just do that. There's another emotion or mood that arises within us that we haven't talked about in this program, and that's called shame. Shame for living the inauthentic life. It wasn't even on the cards before. Before the superego gets development, there's no shame. Because there's no guilt. You're just, a puppet on a string. You're just being formed out of clay. But with the superego comes the guilt that it floods you with when you don't conform to the parental will and the will of the crowd. But the moment you do, shame is born as a reaction to that from a deeper moral center within you called the conscience. And this is the reason why, when we said that the superego must turn up the gain on its mechanism, right, it wouldn't need to do that if there wasn't another voice to silence. Must get this. The importing of the imagos, or the prohibitive, would be one-to-one. And then our lives would not be pathological. Even if we had bad parents, things wouldn't be as bad. By importing their imagos, if it was just one-to-one, that wouldn't be anything as bad as it is. It's the magnification. Now, what this means is that even if you've had fairly decent parents, courtesy of the superego, even their prohibitive voices get far more magnified than they were. This is one of the reasons later on when parents say, we brought the kid up really well. We can't understand why he went so wrong. We're not bad parents. And in some cases, they're right. Because everyone forgets that the role of the superego is to magnify the prohibitive voice. And this can confuse you, you see. But the real reason why it has to magnify and make loud, amplify its own voice, is because there's another voice that it needs to silence. That's the voice of the conscience. And it does silence it. That's why we never hear it. It just becomes a nagging sort of mood underneath. And the existentialists are very interested in it. And that's the voice of shame for living the inauthentic life. So guilt and shame go together. And when the shame can, in some people, bug you so much that it does indeed cause a major, major life change. Now, it's very, very rare that will happen. Almost never. And the superego is such a good gatekeeper. But on the occasion when it does, that's called the dark night of the soul. The philosopher Kierkegaard called it the midnight hour. When actually the voice of the conscience does penetrate through, and suddenly something very deep happens within us, and we overthrow all of this tyranny. The whole house of cards is thrown down. But it's one of the most painful experiences in your life, and it's very cathartic. And as I say, it happens so rarely, you might as well not even bother talking about it. And if it should happen, you won't have many friends helping you along the way. In fact, the whole world will come down on you because remember, the superego imported the voices of the world inside you.
Right.
So all of that's the crowd saying, what do you think you're doing? But anyway, let's move on.
My psychoanalytic work has convinced me that when in the baby's mind the conflicts between love and hate arise and the fears of losing the loved one become active, a very important step is made in development. Melanie Klein.
Yeah, now here's another one. We've added these footnotes on of other pathologies. We talked about the rage. Here's one that probably even equals that. The fear of the loss of the alleged loved one. Also permeating your body, freezing you with, petrifying you with fear. And the adult uses this. But it's built into the system anyway. When I said that the child clings to the rocks of the only beings that it feels, can stabilize it in those early stages, and many, toxic parents will manipulate that, it's along those lines. And some would argue that this fear of losing the parent is probably even more primary even than the rage. But at least let's agree that it's the reason why you permit the rage to flow through you all the time. See, you become masochistic because you'd have to live with the rage as long as that loved one doesn't abandon you. You see how it works?
Yep. Yep.
So all the other syndromes can be piled up and piled up and piled up, and they can eat you like maggots. But you'll say, well, things are still good because they're still here. I'm not completely abandoned.
Right.
Oh, right. But look at the light, look at the conditions, look at the pathology. Yeah, but I know that, but I can stand it. I can withstand that. Because there's even worse. That's being lost in the mall. Where's mommy? Being lost in the circus. So what a situation, what a dynamic.
Yeah.
You know, this later on you find out that wives can't leave these evil husbands, and girlfriends can't, you know, get away from a toxic relationship and all the rest of it. It's replayed in other forms as well. But the child is the most vulnerable. So we're looking at all the syndromes and sub-syndromes. You are going, and the superego loves this, because you're going to suspend criticism, because the superego can always dangle this in front of you. And since these are the only parents you know, they can be as rotten as hell, and you'll still say, "Hail Caesar." Right? You'll go for the comfort of these absurd people. Look at these people who live, you know, in Montana, these fundamentalists. You'll actually believe that these people, I mean, or these silly helicopter mothers over in Japan, trying to tell their kids what to do, you know, pass these exams and all this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'll actually take these people for adults. This is what's happening, because you have no choice. You are the victim. You haven't broken the fourth commandment. You have no way of doing it. And by the time the superego is in charge, it'll flood you with guilt for even the merest thinking along those lines. No longer action is required. Thinking it is enough to flood you with guilt. And therefore you conform. And you become even, in fact, worse than conform, you become the next tyrant in your own life with your own children, because of the contract you've signed. But that's it. The rage is there, the self-loathing, and now the fear of losing the object of love. Convincing yourself that no matter what these necrophilous people have done to you, it's okay, I can handle it. And you go through this ridiculous performance. Mother's Day, gotta get that card.
Brunch too. Don't forget brunch.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And all the the sham of it, like the earlier slide said. It's really repulsive. Let's go on.
A child can experience her feelings only when there is someone there who accepts her fully, understands her, and supports her. If that person is missing, if the child must risk losing the mother's love or her substitute in order to feel, then she will repress emotions. We can never do the right thing as long as we are out to please someone else. Alice Miller, The Drama of the Gifted Child.
Now, this is the crux of the whole thing. The child is out to please the other. It doesn't know any other way. That's why later on, you know, the superego will fool you into identifying with the very object of your hate. That itself is based on an earlier syndrome of needing to please the tyrant, fawning, no choice in the matter. So the superego, all it does is, you know, take that to its complete apotheosis. But can you read the beginning again? Then
A child can experience her feelings only when there is somebody there who accepts her fully, understands her, and supports her.
right. So now we have the I thou back again, that Martin Buber, who was really citing Hegel, actually, back to that again. The first I thou relationship that we experience is the one with the mother. Now, we're talking about times when it breaks down into an it, thanks to the mother, right? She's going to make it this, that the I thou is far too healthy, far too elevated. So she will set the bar and lower it, where she's treating you not as a human being, but as some sort of it. Even in the gentle parenting, that again, this applies. But just let's keep it to what we're talking about right now. Therefore, the child is forced to reduce the mother to an it. It works this way. If I'm not endowed with thou-ness, in the end, I will demote the one who's doing this to me, and will equalize as two its, two fucking zeros. I must maintain the I, thou, for the real empathy to flow back and forth. And this is what Miller is saying breaks down. But it's deeper than that, because the child naturally projects its empathy on the mother. But if the mother and the father are not there to receive it, then I cannot express myself as a being emotionally to them, so I stop doing it. Yeah. We talked about this earlier in a different context, but now it's the same thing. I can no longer express who I am because there's no one there to resonate with. They're just made out of clay. And so why would I continue doing it? So because of their lack of receptivity, and this is because they're not sensitive and not really interested in me as me, I'm just that toy, that wind-up mannequin, then I will cease to emote. In other words, my very selfhood will be curtailed. And the consequences of that, of course, are unbelievable. And then the superego takes over as the pseudo-self.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. You're like the sham, the fake, the persona, the idealized image, as Karen Horney talks about.
Yeah.
Because the real authentic self wasn't heard. In fact, the very sign of it looking like it's trying to express itself, like the terrible parent just goes, no, we don't want that. This is what Alice Miller's work is all about. So we find out that our self as self is loathed. They don't like it. They find it something distasteful. And so I learn to mimic that. I find myself. This is where self-loathing is born. Not to mention the fact that I just don't express myself. So when the schizophrenic girl said, a child has been killed, she was right. It has. And some part of us knows it. The funny thing is that in the middle of all of that schizophrenia, there's still a record. Some part of ourselves is aware of what is happening to us. Some part of us registers the crime. But here again, the child has no choice. These are the catch-22s situations, the no-win situations, the double blinds, right?
Yeah.
That we get, that our parents force us into. And from this, there'll be these compensations as well. Feigning love, feigning the false thing. Because our parents will teach us that, no problem. How to be empty, false beings, no problem being taught that. And by the time we go to school, it's even worse. But the idea is we stop expressing ourselves naturally the way we really are, and we enter into the world, courtesy of the superego, as false beings. And then we scan the world, right? By the time we get to school, all we have to do then is scan the world, again, courtesy of the superego, to make ourselves into a pastiche of others. We like that person, we like that person, we like that trait, yeah, identify with this. And in some sort of hideous hodgepodge of identifications, we then, and this is, taken to its extreme when we get into identity politics. Look at them all. They're all exactly the same. They even speak the same, even their cosmetics, everything. You can't tell one from the other. Their voices are identical. Their attitudes, everyone's identical. They're like clones. Well, it was done even before. And that becomes the pseudo-self. But it gets the approval of the masses. And that lowers the anxiety. This time the anxiety, of course, is the anxiety of guilt. Guilt is lowered. But it doesn't work. Because as the existential psychologist said, guilt may be lowered, but shame is on the rise. So you never win with any of this. The superego is the biggest liar and the fake. Because what it promises you with one hand, it's going to have to take away with another. This is the origin of pathology in our world. And in the end, The existentialist is saying, you're not going to be a whole being until not only do you mollify the guilt, how are you going to mollify this shame? Is there any teachers around who can tell you how to do that? And the answer is no. So I'm in a catch-22 situation. Again, even if I succeed in lowering guilt, there will be a temporary high, a temporary feeling of, yeah, I'm with the crowd. Yeah, we're good. We're good. I get along real well. Look at me. You know, I get up the ladder. You know, everybody loves me. But there's this nagging guilt. So there's more drinking, more needing drugs, more, you know, heading to the doctor to get the prescription, and more feeling of general ennui inside. And we don't know, this time we don't know where it's coming from. So man is, you know, crucified being. He's torn on this bizarre wreck between two wheels. Because even if he goes to the extent of becoming so utterly false and one-dimensional that he does in fact lower the guilt, and the superego goes, good man, we'll lower the guilt now, everything feels good, right? It's purely temporary. Because from the inner core of his being, another, you know, syndrome, actually in one way more profoundly disrupting, which is shame, arises. And now you're overcome with it. And we have nowhere to go, no paradigm. There's not even any existential psychologists around. They're all woke now. Did you know that? They're all woke. They've thrown out the original paradigms of the real founders of existential psychology, and that's all been taken over, just like all the other universities have. It's all critical Marxists in their place now. Oh, fucking brilliant. So there's no solution there. And I'm one of the only people in this entire movement talking about it in the authentic way.
Yep.
What do you do to lower the shame? And they go, Michael, can you not go back to your original stuff of bug-eyed aliens and all? You know, I like that way better. I don't know why you've gone off on this tangent about psychology and stuff. Sure, that's all crap. The audience has left. Okay, well, too bad there. Can't sell a ticket. What, you don't know that this is it? This is the critical thing? You want to talk about Bigfoot?
Sorry.
What the fuck? But they do. And the West is so not wanting to go here that they jump over the tradition and go over to the fucking East to sit with the Dalai Lama and listen to how can I turn off my mind? How can I stun myself?
Yep, exactly.
And drug it with mantras and just turn off the mind, numb it. Well, they've got thousands of years of practice. And it looks all fucking holy. They've even imported, you don't even have to go east anymore. They're bringing it right to your doorstep. Thanks to these Oprah Winfreys and all the rest of them, these Eckhart Tolles. But even before they existed, before they were born, this crap, this pestilence was pouring in from the east. We will do anything but deal with this problem. And therefore, we will be always handicapped by either the guilt or the shame. And we don't even have a psychologist today who can tell the difference. So if you go to therapy, don't guarantee that the therapist is going to know which it is that he's meant to be sorting you out with. And I'll guarantee you that in most cases, you're just throwing your money away because they're fucking useless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You get some woke chick, you're going to fucking be your psychologist, your therapist? That's going to awaken your conscience and your authenticity when they themselves are the walking embodiment of hysterics coming up through the colleges and the Ivy League. I've got to trust that. MD, PhD, bullshit. They're going to psychologize you? Oh, well, fucking right. They can't even solve the teen suicides. Their own, the psychologists, their own kids are about as feral as you can get. And they're going to be in practice to help you? No, not going to happen. It's a critical nightmare. Very few of them will ever be able to help you. And we say we don't even want to go there. I'm going down to the jungle. I'm going down to Costa Rica, find me a shaman, and, you know, fly around the room there. That's going to sort me out, right? Every trick in the book. But this is all spiritual bypassing.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And we don't even know that these jungle environments replicate the regression back to the semiotic, back into the unfree, into the chthonic, away from the light of development. We are not aware of any of that. We can't work that out. The simple corollary of that. Is there any more slides there?
We have 2 left.
Okay, let's go for that, please.
A child born today in the United Kingdom stands a 10 times greater chance of being admitted to a mental hospital than to a university. This can be taken as an indication that we are driving our children mad more effectively than we are genuinely educating them. Perhaps it is our way of educating them that is driving them mad. From R.D. Laing in The Divided Self.
Well, there you go. You see, you're saturated with it, and then the child becomes part of it through the contract that the superego demands. This identification with the object of your hate will mean that you can now borrow a measure of their power, you can mold yourself in their image, and you can have the anxiety lowered, the anxiety of guilt. And you go for it, because the turbulent forces within you are raging. You know, it's like a man in a state of pain. He'll need immediately his morphine. It's like a drug addict trying to come off the drug, withdrawal symptoms, something like that. So yeah, this is the contract we all form inside ourselves. And we live then always to make sure that we stay within that little zone. And because the big threatening reality was out there, the superego gets away with it. It's problematic. We're never 100% convinced, but at least it keeps us going. And so then we also need to make sure that there's certain stabilizers outside. And so this would then be the routine of work, like the sitting in the car, the driving to my block, the sitting in the cubicle, yeah, the hierarchies of progress and being promoted, and my coffee break, and my assurances. You see, the whole thing is regulated, regimented, super lit, right? I need my fluorescent environments. Everything needs to be lit. I can't have any dark shadows anywhere. Everybody's got a smile. Just watch the movie 1 Hour Photo. Robin Williams' fantastic last movie, right? What a fucking masterpiece, right?
Yeah, I've seen it a few
And there's
times.
many others. What?
I've seen it a few times. I really liked it. Yeah.
So fucking glad, yeah. They've nailed it all there. Nailed it all. And that's the world we want. That's the world, you know, that we demarcate. And also, as Heidegger said, we need our 12-hour clock. We need our calendars. We need our pseudo time. Because then we measure how good we're doing. We need performance charts. You know what I mean? We need that.
Oh, yeah.
Because the superego is demanding. It's a set of new demands. The parents had their demands in the early stages. Now the superego takes over. It's the parent in the head. And we've got to make sure we're checking off. It's an obstacle course. But how can it give us what we want? How can it give us the praise we want unless we've checked off where we were? Were we gold? Were we silver? Were we bronze? I don't know. So then we become hyper-focused on our own performance, right? In everything, in every conceivable way. Always checking it against a mob, checking against a herd, checking against somebody else. The fiasco with sports, billions of dollars Not going to fix the world or into psychology or philosophy. No. Running around a track. Fucking greyhounds do it. They chase a rabbit. Well, we'll chase the prize. It's no different. Swat golf balls or tennis balls or whatever and give ourselves $1 million prizes for it. The whole thing is so fucking absurd. And it just gets worse. It just gets more and more absurd till you just lose the plot. Let's go to the last one, please.
The abused child goes on living with those who have survived such torture, a torture that ended with total repression. They live with the darkness of fear, oppression, and threats. When all its attempts to move the adult to heed its story have failed, it resorts to the language of symptoms to make itself heard. Enter addiction, psychosis, criminality. And this is from For Your Own Good, Hidden Cruelty in Child Rearing and the Roots of Violence by Alice Miller. And we see a comment at the bottom of this slide that says, the child remains unaware that its own parents are little more than abused children themselves.
Now, this is important. As we said about the relative ignorance of the child in relation to the parent knows itself as parent and it knows itself to be superior. But the child also can only see the parent as inferior. It has no cognitive ability to know that this is not a superior being. This is a wretched child raising me. That's it. The child has no way of knowing just how wretched and ignorant and pathetic and conformist, because the early part of the quote gives you another insight. The parent, when I said that the superego checks off your earnings and your winnings and your successes, in this pathological state of affairs, that you survived yourself in a world of tyranny becomes your claim to fame. Right? So the slave who ended up becoming rich and a master, that is his feeling of superiority. So the bar, the measuring, the gauge by which you now gain self-esteem is itself so rancid, so toxic. I've survived in the nightmare. I'm not going to fix the nightmare. I've survived, but I'm not going to change it. No, I become another pillar of it. You see, you don't teach its absurdity. Therefore, like Miller was doing, to end it, to scratch it. No, you prize yourself and you pat yourself on your back for going through it as if it's something positive that made you something great.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're standing above this whole mountain of fucking skulls and praising yourself for some sort of achievement. And you want to brag about it. Again, you're under the supremacy, the dominion of the superego. And you've lost the real gauge to say how absurd all of this is. And when things like existentialism came about in philosophy, they didn't want it. So it ceased. Wherever this type of voice came about, we didn't want it. It didn't get the publicity. Dr. Phil, not Alice Miller. Right? Jerry Springer, even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to wheel out the freak show, right?
Yeah.
And look at the freak show, but don't look at the freak show inside of you.
No.
Like that's really what it is.
You look at you end up thinking it was some sort of obstacle course, and you've actually won a gold medal. That never hurt me. Yes, it did. But in this upside down world, you have to praise yourself for something. So what it really means is that you are the biggest rat in the race. All that happened is that of all of this horror, you managed to swim and get out of it. You know, and overcome what you, in your own mind, some of the obstacles and hurdles, and you find a measure of success within this rotten thing. But you're not turning back like an Ayn Rand or a Krishnamurti or somebody like that and saying, right, this has to end, like Wilhelm Reich, like the greats. You just assume that it's there and nothing can be done about it. Because number one, all your energy has been, in fact, exhausted. And I believe that, you know, it's been exhausted to the point that you don't even have what's left in the tank to be able to philosophize and to look at things psychologically, because that does take a lot of effort. Remember, we've said before, psychology is the only subject that is different than all the other subjects because the object of your study is the self. So subject and object collapse. No other subject does that. This is not biology. This is not cooking. This is not astronomy or gardening, right? Where there's a subject-object relationship. In psychology, you are studying yourself. And this is slippery and unusual. And most people in the world find it so unusual, they just can't get their mind around it. Because it takes a bit of training, takes a bit of patience and time to realize what's going on here. We've just been taught, like, you know, a bunch of fucking trained rats, subject, object, that we haven't even got the mental agility to be able to say, oh no, I myself, I'm the object of the questions that I'm posing. I have skin in the game here. That's why I can't read a Martin Buber or an Alice Miller or whatever. It's just too toxic. It just doesn't feel right. Can't get my mind around it. Need it shrink wrapped, you know, some spinner rack version of it. Like I said, the Dr. Phil level. And even then, yeah, just want to bypass the whole thing. Give me some magical child thinking, you know, Rhonda Burns. This is the unique subject. Unique. And no sooner did it get going than it already got hijacked by the left. Because they're in everywhere.
Yeah.
Given a few reasons why that was. And then when they found out they couldn't use Freud, they turned against him. And start writing books, you know, to try and demonize him and throw you off. You know, first of all, they thought they could use him, and they were all in favor of him. But 5 minutes later, when they realized, oh dear, that changed. It wasn't because of Freud, it was because of society changed. But just like the rats they are, they turned on Freud himself. That's how disingenuous these people are, and they'll do it again. They'll do it to any one of their own people. As soon as, you know, they did it. Phyllis Chesler, remember? Woman's Inhumanity to Woman. Anybody going to read that book? Leading feminist? Writing that book? Read the introduction of the book when she tells you what happened to her when they knew that she was going to publish such a book. I mean, that would be worth doing a podcast on, just to read that introduction.
Yeah. If I'm recalling correctly, didn't her agent tell her not to do it? Like, I just,
Yes.
yeah.
Her best friends did as well. Yeah. Everybody warned her, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. It's because it's a cabal. They're not interested in truth. But I think we can leave it there. We've shown some supplementary points that were very, very important. And again, we brought it this absolutely monumental theme. It is not just the young child and the infant that goes through the psychosexual stages. The adult is actually doing it also, reliving it. And maybe that was one of the underlying impulses that we have for birthing our own children, by the way, is because we, in our own youth, when we tried it, we know we were arrested. And this memory bank of the unconscious mind still, you know, knows where those empty categories are. It still has the memory of these absences, these abscesses. And so running along with our own child's development, we ourselves get another go round. It's neither bad nor good. It's just the way things are. We get a chance to go through it. In fact, it's quite amazing that we even get that chance. But whether or not it's going to help uninstall, right, the overwhelming power of the superego, who can say? But it comes back to what I maintain in my work, that we're already in an anti-psychological society. And I didn't mean non-psychological. I said anti-psychological. It's worse than being non-psychological. It's an antipathy, an animus against it. And we see in our world all the evidence of that. But, you know, these are eternal truths. They're not going to change just because people have resistance. And in the end, by neglecting the psychology, you know, it's all waiting for us around the corner. And it's very, 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 very important never to fool the human race. And what I mean by that is if you're a teacher in this world, don't give them false promises that everything's going to be okay. That's not blackpilling anyone. I'd rather blackpill people if it means telling them the truth. Because the worst thing than blackpilling is to give false hope and to bamboozle. Teacher doesn't have the right to do that. If you've gone up Periscope or you've climbed up the mountain and looked on the other side and what you see is not good, you have to come back and tell people that. You are absolutely honor bound to do that. You're not to lie. You're not to give falsehoods. You're not to breed false hope, knowing that the human race will take that and go, okay, back to lunch. Where's the dessert? Break open some more of the champagne, then everything's all right. It's cushy. That's what they'll do.
Yeah.
That's what they've always done. But even no matter what the response is, you are morally obligated by moral law never to lie. So when people ask you, so are you pessimistic? Are you optimistic about the future? Why are you asking that?
Mm.
You see, you're demanding for me to tell you the truth. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I'm not going to give you an optimistic answer just to, you know, appease your ego. Because as a teacher, I have an edict, an absolute law that can't give you false hope. I may say I don't know the answer. You know, I'm still putting it together or something I don't know, I don't want to say. That's okay. But I certainly can't give you false hope. That's not right. That's deceiving the human race. So what I prefer to do is do what we're doing right now. Just lay out the facts and let everybody else decide. Don't ask me what the future is going to be. It's a moot point. It's irrelevant. Be glad that I've mustered enough fucking intelligence to do the work that I have done and go elsewhere for these other pacifications. Go talk, right. The Dalai Lama has got an address, an email. You can, you know, consult him. Yeah, there's plenty of you know, talk to Dr. Phil. I do what I do. I can present these facts. I'm not in any way, you know, obligated or concerned how people take this information. No expectations at all. None. Zero.
Well, I think that's why I personally appreciate it. I think it's why a lot of people appreciate it because, you know, I can't speak for the audience, but I know I get resentful around bullshit and lies. And when somebody is just telling the truth, I mean, yeah, it can hurt, but I would much rather know that we don't got this and that we got work to do rather than to be fooled by that illusion and then not put any effort into improving as a person. So,
Right.
I just want to thank you again for another amazing episode. Just, you know, just keeps filling in all the blanks, adding texture, the pictures becoming clearer and clearer. And yeah, just very much appreciate that.
You're welcome. thank you for making it possible. We're really thrilled. So, yeah, good one.
Of course. All
Thanks
right.
for reading all those slides as well.
It's no problem. That's no problem. I appreciate having the chance to read them. I mean, I'm learning a lot from this. So yeah, thanks all around. And I'm really looking forward to the next one.
And with that, we bring this episode of The Dark Side of the Female Psyche to a close. There's still more to come in this series, so make sure you're subscribed to Willfully Evolving Woman here on YouTube and turn on your notifications so that you'll know when the next episode is ready. More social media accounts may be added in due time, so if that interests you, bookmark willfullyevolvingwoman.com and be sure to check back periodically. If you would like to follow Michael and learn more from him, you can find his works through the following channels: dragonmother.org, femalepsychology.org, and of course, michaeltsarion.com. And if you're interested in Michael's premium presentations and the Unslaved podcast, you can find those by becoming a member at unslaved.com or unslaved.substack.com. I'm Sarah DeHaven, and on behalf of Michael and myself, thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. See you in the next episode.